Welcome to Climate Change and Health in Small Island Developing States, focused on the Caribbean. If you require translation into Spanish or French, please use the link posted in the chat and choose your desired language at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You should continue to keep this browser open as well to utilize the chat and Q&A features. Please be sure to scroll down and mute the video. Please use the Q&A feature to submit any questions for the panelists. This session is being recorded. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. Welcome to this session on multi-sectoral cooperation, which I think is something critical. We are too often caught thinking and acting in silos, which introduces tremendous inefficiencies into what we do. So it's important that if we are going to address these issues effectively, that we basically cooperate and talk to each other across the different sectors. The other reason is that in a region plagued with scarce resources, we have to make the most effective use of the scarce resources that are available. So this type of collaboration helps us to use resources in a much more effective way. We had some delay, we apologize for that. And so I will, let me introduce myself, sorry. My name is Ulrich Trotz. Until recently, the end of last year, I was Deputy Director and Science Advisor to the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center based here in Belize. We have an excellent panel of speakers, and let me introduce them. First, we have Francis Barron, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Climate Resilience Executing Agency for Dominica, CRADE. She is a lawyer by training, and in her career, she has served as Dominica's High Commissioner to London, and after as Attorney General and Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs in the Dominican government. Currently, and she holds the post as the Chief Executive Officer of the Climate Resilience Executing Agency for Dominica, CRADE. And in that capacity, has the responsibility for leading and coordinating strategic initiatives across sectors to support the implementation of Dominica's climate resilient recovery plan. The other speaker is no stranger to the regions, Kishan Kumar Singh, Head of Multilateral Environmental Agreements, Ministry of Planning and Development for Trinidad and Tobago. He's been in climate change trenches for a long time, ever since the latter years of the last century, hence his 23 years of experience. And he has done the region proud, not only representing Trinidad and Tobago, but being the chair of some critical organs of the convention. He was chair of the expert group on technology transfer and chair of the SUBSTA, the subsidiary body on scientific and technological advice, and co-chair to the ad hoc working group on the Durban platform, which was the body charged with negotiating the Paris Agreement. Our next speaker hails from the Dominican Republic, Emily Rodriguez, who is a chemical engineer. That's her background, but she has been very much involved in the preparation and reporting of mitigation actions in Dominican Republic. She is now the mitigation analyst attached to the Mitigation Department of the National Council of Climate Change of the Dominican Republic. And in that capacity, she has had inputs into several activities, most critical at this time into the preparation of their revised National Determinant contributions, which is a document we all have to prepare to submit to the UNFCCC, to the convention. And finally, we have Damian Graves, Chair of Grenada National Chronic Non-Communicable Disease Commission in Grenada. He is, at the moment, Professor of Social Sciences in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, an Associate Dean in the School of Arts and Science at the St. George University. And previously in politics, he was Minister for Community Development, Culture, Local Government, Cooperatives, and Ecclesiastical Affairs in the government of St. Lucia from 1997 to 2001. The Minister of Health, Human Services, Family Affairs, and Gender Relations from 2001 to 2006, and currently a board member of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition and chair of the Grenada National Chronic Non-Communicable Disease Commission, his NCD, not to be mixed up with the NDC. Without much further ado, we'll move to our first speaker, who will be Mr. Kishan Kumar Singh, who will speak to us basically on the evolution of energy sector and how health features in planning in Trinidad and Tobago experience. Kishan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trotz, and thank you everyone and to the organizers for allowing me the opportunity to share my thoughts on this. I must admit that I was a latecomer on this segment, largely because when I inquired about whether there was any actual health planning or health issues considered in energy planning, no one seemed to understand or know what I was talking about. It was a concept that was apparently strange to the energy folks when I started to talk to them, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but elsewhere. And on reflection, there appears to be a very good reason for that. And that is because the source of energy historically has been largely vested in the exploitation, the exploration, and the combustion of fossil fuels for energy use. And with the combustion of fossil fuels came a lot of unintended consequences that we are now having to grapple with in these times. Least of which is climate change. But with that also came a lot of air pollution issues, because the combustion of fossil fuels saw the emissions of various air pollutants that had adverse impacts on human health in particular, such as black carbon, or soot as we know it, that comes from not only power generation plants that use oil or coal or even gas if the combustion level is not oxidative enough and the fuel is not combusted properly, as well as from the tailpipes of cars, methane also coming from energy exploration, oil and gas sector. And with that came also secondary pollutants, such as the generation of ground level ozone, particularly from the transportation sector, using fossil fuels for combustion and energy by virtue of reacting with nitrous oxide, another air pollutant, and uncombusted organic carbon to give ozone, which is a health pollutant. So what we saw happening basically was that the reverse was true, that health issues were not considered in energy planning, and therefore it came as an afterthought, not only for its direct impacts on human health through cardiovascular impacts, respiratory ailments, and so on, but also manifesting in climate change and the indirect impacts that climate change has on human health, such as water availability, food security because of crop yields being decreased and so on. So that now addressing climate change will have health benefits. And what is coincidental or serendipitous, if you want to call it that, with now managing the energy transition, because we're now phasing out of the fossil fuel era into the clean energy area of renewables. Here in Trinidad, we have now looked at compressed natural gas as a transportation fuel, and also transitioning out of that into electric vehicles charged with renewable energy. So we are seeing now that the energy transition itself, by virtue of the need to address emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, to temper climate change because of the climate emergency that we now find ourselves in. The IPCC report of just a few weeks ago basically was a code red saying that we can actually achieve the temperature goal in 2100 by 2030, and that's not an achievement. Actually, it's a disappointment, because it means that the emissions are a runaway, and there's a need to act, with some urgency in tempering and reducing these emissions. And switching to renewable energy for power generation is one of the ways that that now most countries are pursuing because of the cost parity. And with that comes the realization that not only would there be less emissions from fossil fuels, such as the short-lived carbon, the short-lived air pollutants that I spoke about, such as black carbon and methane and tropospheric ozone, but also there would be health benefits because you'll have cleaner air, less ground-level pollutants, and therefore less burdens on the health system. But let me segue into the need for multilateral approaches, multidimensional approaches in addressing climate change, because it is a phenomena that will affect every sector, and therefore every sector has a responsibility to act to respond to climate change, not only to reduce emissions or to contribute to reducing emissions, but also to contribute to adapting or building resilience to the adverse impacts of climate change. And that also includes the sectors, the water sector, for example. In our part of the world, climate models project a reduction in water availability, and with that comes human health impacts such as sanitation, potable water for drinking, but also projected is increase in intensity of rainfall, which will lead to flooding and greater incidences of vector-borne diseases, destruction of crops, a reduction in crop yields, implications for food security, and so on. So the impacts are myriad and cross-sectional and cross-sectoral, and therefore it is important that in dealing with climate change, if you look at the impacts, there are subtle underlying health issues. I just said I spoke to water and agriculture and food security and sanitation and so on, and therefore in the energy transition, not only are the energy companies and the ministries of energy need to liaise with others, such as Ministry of Transport or industrial sector that are also responsible for emissions, but also in planning for building climate resilience to minimize the incidences of the adverse impacts of climate change on human health also needs to be harmonized and coalesced around a single objective. And my recent mantra here in Trinidad and Tobago is in addressing climate change is one agenda, many leaders. And I think that underscores the need for cooperative and collaborative approaches from all sectors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kishan. And thanks for introducing the issue of fossil fuels and mitigation and climate benefits. Whenever we talk about fossil fuels on the climate change umbrella, we've been talking strictly about greenhouse gas emissions. The health issue might give us an excellent entry point to the public to start a discussion or to continue a discussion on this particular issue. We move now to our next speaker, Emily Rodriguez, who will tell us about health in Dominican Republic's NDC. How did they input health issues into the broader policy directives? Emily?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And this is, can you see my screen?
Sorry. No, not yet.
Sorry, let's try it again. Okay.
Yes,
Now,
it's there.
thank you very much. So the immediate health benefits of climate change mitigation and adaptation. The health in the Dominican Republic nationally determined contribution. First of all, let's see a briefing of the Dominicans NDC 2020. We have increased an ambition of our emission reduction of 25% to 27% regarding the business as usual. In the finances, we have 50% of annotation and 50% of mitigation. 20 of the 100% is external finances conditionated, and 7% is domestic finances unconditionated. You can find 46 mitigation options and 37 adaptation measures. The health in the Dominicans NDC 2020 is in strategic axis. In the first three axes, of course, is the health sector, the water sector, and the agriculture sector, which are in the adaptation measures has a direct health benefits. And in the mitigation option, we have indirect benefits, has the Mr. Was talking about the energy sector, but the waste sector and the agriculture sector. In the health sector, we have these health benefits. The improved health services by vulnerable groups. For example, physics and psychological health of affected people for hurricanes. Improve hospitals infrastructure with ecological standards. Having preventing systems, early warming and management impacts of climate events. And we are going to obtain data to take decisions through baseline studies of mapping vulnerabilities to find out climate sensitive illness and prepare vulnerability and adaptation assessments on health systems. The next sector is water sector. The health benefits is so important is ensuring water resources provision. And this means keeping care the population health for the good hydratation and keeping care the population health for body grooming and cleaning at home. The agriculture sector have these health benefits, food security and ensure jobs of agriculture workers and the economy of implementation of the water and energy efficiency. That means ensure the health and saving money of croppers for maintenance health. And in the part of the food security, we will have an ensure to good population nutrition too. In the transport sector, we will have a cardiovascular and respiratory system protected, reduce the sudden death, reduce the environmental stress of daily commuting, maximize air quality by planting municipal trees, and increase wellness levels of population. This sector, the agriculture, the transport, and the waste sector are having this health benefits because we have introduced the short-life climate pollutants in our Ncds. And the health benefits of the waste sector are improving respiratory and cardiovascular health of population because capturing CH4 generated, maintains the food security and to protect the respiratory system of populations because a better waste management and reducing the disease outbreaks by rodents, insects, and microorganisms. And last but not least, we have cross-cutting issues and gender, youth, and human rights. In the part of gender, we have the Gender and Climate Change Action Plan has the waste sector as prioritized sectors. And the Quality Gender National Plan has the integrity health, one of the 7 national topics, and the Health Ministry has the Office of Equality, Gender, and Development. In the Young National Plan 2020-2030 is a policy instrument, and 3 of its axes are integrity health, sane environment, and citizen security. And in the human rights, we have the Development National Strategy, which is allowed, and it established a building ensuring population's health and basic service. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you, Emily, for that presentation. What it does remind us about is that there's no sector that pervades the entire climate change landscape like health sector. And it needs to have much more prominence in our climate change actions in the Caribbean. Next, Damien is going to speak to us in the role of multi-sectoral cooperation in action on climate change and health. Over to you, Damien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're looking at the role of multi-sectoral cooperation, and I'm speaking specifically to effective multi-sectoral action, lessons learned from NCD commissions. Are you seeing my slides?
Yes, we are.
Thank you very much. So the first point we have to make is that NCD commissions, a little background on NCD commissions, the non-communicable disease commissions really came to the fore or were birthed in about 2007 after the special regional summit on chronic diseases. And there was the Port of Spain Declaration in 2007, which with its thematic approach of uniting to stop the epidemic of chronic non-communicable diseases. And of course, as a result of that, the heads of state and the heads of government thought about the establishment or made a pronouncement on the establishment of non-communicable disease commissions or analogous group bodies to plan and coordinate the comprehensive prevention and control of NCDs. So what's a national NCD commission? According to WHO, and I quote, it's a high-level commission, agency or task force for engagement, policy coherence, mutual accountability, and to implement health in all policies and whole of government and whole of society approaches, and to monitor and act on the determinants of NCDs, including social and environmental determinants. So look, so we're talking about NCDs, but here we have the environmental, and we know that also includes climate change. Now, the role and functions of multi-sectoral cooperation, I would suggest, would be planning. So you have all of these sectors coming together, government agencies, quasi-agencies, or some people say quasi-agencies, also civil society organizations, grassroots organizations, NGOs. So we're talking about planning, monitoring and evaluation, prioritizing, advocacy, so very important, advice to the government agencies and so on. But we're also talking about engagement, communication, messaging, which has since COVID-19 become more prominent in our lexicon across the region in terms of the proper messaging to the masses of the people and to the consumers. So what are the core principles of successful NCDCs? First of all, what we have to talk about is legitimacy. What gives them legitimacy is the highest competent authority in the country to give that legitimacy, usually the government, the cabinet of ministers, we call them. We're also talking about authority. Where should they derive their authority? Again, it is to fulfill the mandate. The mandate, it's the level of decision making and mechanisms and so on. So the authority is there. Then we talk about multi-sectorality. All the sectors coming together. We talk about credibility, transparency and accountability as aspects of good governance. We have to take care of the conflict of interest procedures in terms of the entities having various mandates, but also demands from the point of view that mechanisms must be put in place to ensure that members' actions and decisions are not influenced by personal and professional biases and interests. You need the adequate resources, human and financial. Sustainability is the order of the day. And of course, we would need the strategic planning and management. These are the core principles of, I would say the core principles of successful multi-sectoral strategies or multi-sectoral organizations. We also have to talk about the lessons learned from the NCD commissions. What were those lessons learned? The lessons learned were collaboration. Some people talk about partnership. Partnership is okay, but sometimes partnership remains on paper. What you need is collaboration, a sort of integration. And keep in mind, integration is not part of our cultural organizational development. We like to operate in silos. So it is not normal to borrow that term these days, it is not normal to operate collaboratively. We talk about partnerships and it's just on paper, but we do not do the coming together. Networking is important. The knowledge of stakeholder skill sets, keeping the fire burning and staying that course. And of course, strong leadership is important for these multi-sectoral organizations that we are talking about. Now, and other lessons that we can look at is keeping the strengths and weaknesses in mind, because we know that we are human, we make errors and so on. Let's keep those weaknesses in mind. Let's keep our eyes on the prize, harnessing the experiences of every agency in that particular collaborative effort, periodic introspection and reality checks. I always say there comes a time when we need to do what I call a stakeholder analysis to see who is on board, who is not quite on board, who thinks that it will drop off, and who thinks that it will drop off. And therefore, we need to ensure that everybody is reading on the same page with the same vision, the same goals, and so on. The recognition of efforts also for effective participation. Sometimes we do not recognize the efforts of people in that multi-sectoral situation. Participatory planning has to be the order of the day if there's to be a success story. And of course, perpetuated a mission mode. We're on a mission to do something for climate change. So this is what we are looking at. So let's look at some of the success factors. Multi-sectoral action plan with broad strategic areas of action, whole of government, whole of society agenda, strong and committed leadership. I mentioned that before, that is critical, but you also need committed, dedicated members. All must be on board. Collaboration, we said, among stakeholders. A respectable relationship with the parent ministry or organization. That is critical. Is there a respectable relationship between the Ministry of Health and the National Chronic Disease Commission? Very importantly, avoiding stakeholder hegemony or domination, or what I would like to say, stakeholder bullying. It's not a situation where you're a multi-sectoral agency operating on behalf of the country that there must be a stakeholder or stakeholders that believe that they must claim the landscape. Everybody must be involved and everybody must be given an opportunity to be involved. The diversity of discussion topics is also important to keep things going, and also having an appropriate meeting facility. These days we are using Zoom. Before that, we were meeting physically, but we must have that appropriate meeting facility to facilitate what I call group dynamics and the expression and cultivation of ideas. So I believe that there's what you call an ethic of a multi-sectoral strategy. My mantra is that teamwork is not automatic. Teamwork is not inherent. It must be nurtured. So the idea that people sometimes say, put agriculture together, put Ministry of Sustainable Development together, put Ministry of Health and all of these agencies together and the civil society organization, and let them go into the room and start to brainstorm and come up with plans for us. No, sir. It has to be a process that is nurtured, because we have not been socialized as organizations to work together. So it has to be a nurturing process. For me, finally, climate change, if we look at climate change and Caribbean civil society, we are saying it's a social movement. If we have to talk about multi-sectoral collaboration for climate change, it has to be a social movement. Now, we are saying that the greatest movement of the 21st century, according to Sir Hilary Beckles, would be the reparations movement. I want to partner with him and say yes, but that reparations movement must also take into account chronic diseases, COVID-19, climate change, and all of those other issues that would surround it, so that there'll be a groundswell of support. Our keynote speaker said that we need a champion. The champion, he's saying, must be the Ministry of Health or the health system. I agree. But at the end of the day, ultimately, the champions must be those who are affected. And so those champions have to push forward to ensure that those who walk the corridors of decision-making do what is necessary for the protection of ourselves and for the protection of the country and for the well-being and development project of the Caribbean. So there are three options. Once you have that ground cell and the multi-sectoral organization has that ground cell and grounds with the brothers and sisters, there are only three options left for those who walk the corridors of decision-making. Option number one, lead the charge as you're being pushed by that groundswell or that tidal wave, to borrow a climatic term. Secondly, if you get out of the way as you're being pushed, if you can handle the situation. And thirdly, if you do not move, the tendency is that you will be crushed and trampled on. So better you just go ahead with the movement, take what is happening from the bottom and go up to go up to the top as we move forward. I want to thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damien, for that presentation. Obviously, you're a man in the trenches with the whole issue of effective multi-sectoral action. I was attracted to a statement you made about partnership and collaboration. I think it's something we should take a note of. And I'm glad you mentioned the question of resources, because for the Caribbean, I think that is the basic limiting factor to our lack of action.
Absolutely.
Now we come to our final speaker, who should have been first, Francis Barron, who is going to tell us about transforming Dominica to the world's first climate resilient nation, defining metrics, identifying gaps, implementing flagship initiatives. Over to you, Francis.
Thank you. Thank you. Are my slides appearing? Yes.
Not yet.
All right. Sorry, I seem to be having.
It's on now. It's on now.
Okay. Good evening to all. And it's my pleasure to participate in this session this evening. And I wanted to start off by asking the question, why invest in building resilience? A few days after Dominica was devastated by Hurricane Maria in 2017, our Prime Minister declared to the world our reality that we are indeed on the front lines of the war on climate change. And what does that mean for us? It means that we are particularly vulnerable to extreme weather events, that climate change will make disasters more frequent and more severe, and that being stuck in the build, destroy, rebuild cycle will lead to increased levels of debt and economic hardship, and that environmental migration will become more pronounced. 2 successive storms in 2015 and 2017 resulted in combined losses equivalent to 300% of our GDP. And how does a small country recover from this? How do we respond to this threat? The answer is clear. We have to reduce our vulnerabilities and adapt to the impact of climate change. Dominica developed a national resilience development strategy and a climate resilience and recovery plan. And this is focused on bringing Dominica to a level of resilience by 2030. That would allow us to minimize our losses from extreme events and bounce forward quicker. With the support of our partners, the governments of the UK and the Canada, Dominica formed the Climate Resilience Execution Agency for Dominica CREED to guide our recovery and resilience building process. We are approaching resilience in a holistic manner that will allow Dominica to not only build resilience to weather events, but also shocks like the COVID pandemic that continues to debilitate our economies. Our plan has as its core 3 main resilience dimensions: building strong communities, a robust economy, and well-planned and durable infrastructure. And I would like, for the purposes of this discussion, to focus on strong communities. Individual and community resilience underpins a nation's response to disasters and the value of having a cohesive, well-informed and prepared community. And this should not be undervalued. Human resilience must be a key focus of any plan, and thus healthy people contribute to stronger communities. We have developed some key climate resilience targets to 2030 that include 0 fatalities from extreme weather events, communities able to operate independently for 15 days post extreme weather events, and individuals able to revert to basic living standards within 4 days. These targets are premised on establishing communities that are able to manage and maintain certain basic functions and structures during disastrous events. So such as access to shelter, food, water, power, telecommunications, and basic health services. We identified the need to encourage enhanced collective consciousness as being a strong determinant of resilience, developing respect for people and the environment. And this includes guiding mindsets and behaviors that promote respect, dignity, and peace among citizens, so that no one is excluded or left behind. One of our key initiatives is our Community Emergency Readiness Initiative. And we categorized our communities according to their level of vulnerability. And we're working with them to ensure that they have disaster committees in place, disaster management plans, and that their key vulnerabilities are identified and addressed. And we have the Kudmet Dominic initiative, which dovetails into this one. And it promotes individual and community self-help and cooperation, particularly in the immediate response to a crisis situation. So Damian Greaves spoke a while ago about teamwork not having to be nurtured. So part of what we're doing is to work with the communities so that in the event of a disaster, they are accustomed to working together and supporting each other so that they can work as a team to recover quickly. One of our, I wanted to give an example of a key community of Clifton that during Hurricane Maria, they acted together to protect and to support the community. And just to speak about some of the stories that were told, we decided to open the shelters and prepare for the worst. We rounded up the strong men and women in the community and began to take the elderly and housebound in the shelter, and all the people whom we thought required to move to a safer place. In one instance, a lady who had just given birth about a week before, she said, I was afraid being home with my newborn and a 3-year-old toddler. The men came in the dead of the night, they wrapped my baby and took her away to safety, and they helped me and my toddler to safety. I don't know how they did it, but I was relieved to be in the shelter. I felt safe. And you know, they formed groups of skilled men and women and went from house to house. They repaired damaged homes and roofs and made it easier for people to return to their homes. So that alleviated the stress on the accommodation of people in the shelters. So it shows the importance of teamwork and having a plan. It is important, I think, to recognize that the cost of our small islands becoming resilient cannot be met by us alone. The estimated cost, for example, of Dominica becoming resilient by 2030 is approximately $10 billion. And there is a financing gap of about $4 billion. And the support of the international community and organizations are critical, and for the major polluters, morally imperative. We have seen countries and institutions stepping up to the plate, but so much more is required. Since Hurricane Maria, we have partnered with the Pan American Health Organization, supported by funding from the FCDO of the UK under the Smart Health Care Facilities project. And this is designed to reduce risk and introduce green measures and implement smart standards for health facilities to be better able to provide services and ensure that they are available and functional post-disaster events. To safeguard the lives of our citizens and secure their well-being, particularly when they live in vulnerable situations. We have partnered with the European Union to construct purpose-built emergency shelters in key locations around the country. And this really complements the efforts that the government has made to build resilient housing and migrate from the use of schools as emergency shelters. So efforts are also underway with support from the World Bank, FAO, and ICA to provide practical support to farmers and develop an agricultural policy and transformation strategy. And this will help secure our food security, the health of our nation, and support the development of a robust economy. It's all essentials to building resilience and sustainability. I will stop here. Suffice it to say that there's a lot of work to be done. We are happy to share our experience, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and learn from others. We really need to support each other if we are to achieve an acceptable level of resilience and sustainability. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Francine. I think that's most exciting news coming out of Dominica. You raise an issue that is something dear to my heart, and this is about community sort of safety and etc. And when I look back at our work in the Caribbean, we have done tremendous work looking at the vulnerability of different sectors, tourism, health, looking at, not health, sorry, health has been a neglected partner, and several agriculture, food security, etc. But we have not addressed the issue of vulnerable communities. And I think it's about time we start at that level. And I'm sure you would find, if you look at issues of vulnerable communities, health will certainly emerge as one of the most important issues and concerns at the community level. So this basically, the other thing is that you are in an exciting job at the moment. I wish I were younger and had that challenge, because you have the possibility at this point in time to show what building back stronger, building back better really means. What does it translate into? And again, I don't know if the health sector could piggyback on this effort to show how important it is to include issues of health into the equation when we're talking about adaptation, etc. So those are a few random thoughts at the moment. And now we go over to question time. Any questions? I haven't had a chance to look at chat, but there's a question here about basically sectors and how they are, how one decides about how you include health issues into sectors and there. So I would open it to the panel as to how do you select sectors for consideration of health? What are the sectors basically that one needs to sort of focus on, and what are the issues under the different sectors? So I'll open the floor to the rest of the panel, to sort of respond.
All right, I could take a stab at it. Oh, okay. Kishan, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. No, this is something. The question struck home immediately, and that is why I was quick to jump to answer. So apologies for that, Damien. One of the approaches that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, we have decided to undertake is based on the recognition that climate change is a developmental issue. It's a national development issue. And therefore, I think Neville said earlier that there's no one super ministry that will solve all of the climate change problems. And every stakeholder or set of stakeholders have their own roles and responsibilities. So our approach has been, and I see the reference to memorandum of understandings, and that might be useful, but our approach has been one of policy harmonization and integration into the national development planning process and the national development framework, which is underpinned by climate change as well. So that, for example, in developing water resources strategies, for example, not only are water issues taken into consideration in terms of winning and distribution, but in terms of supply and the impacts that climate change would have on that supply and on the demand as well, because in a changing climate, you have increasing temperatures, you have more demand for irrigation, for agriculture, for sanitation, for potable use, and so on. Similarly, for infrastructure development, where our approach has been to assess climate risks and therefore integrate intervention options into the National Development Program through a pathways approach, so that over time, when the risks manifest themselves again, you can reassess your intervention options and therefore build resiliency along the way. So what you've not been doing wrong, rather than inject a lot of capital planning for long-term impacts, that the uncertainty of which remain because of the climate models and because of the rate of climate change. So integrating climate risks in all sectors, policy harmonization is critical. And I think underpinning all of that is a need for all of the stakeholders to understand fully their roles and responsibilities in the climate change national development program. So again, echoing the one agenda, many leaders approach to addressing climate change, and health is critical to all of that, because it underpins human well-being, and there are many other things associated with climate change that impinges on health and human well-being, and I alluded to a few of them in my presentation: waterborne diseases, food security, potable water availability, sanitation, and things like that. And I said that, if you examine every impact everywhere, there is usually some kind of health a signal, a human health signal, whether it's food availability, livelihoods, or anything like that. So one way of doing it is really that policy harmonization, integration, the recognition that climate change is a national development issue, and therefore dismantling the silos through a one agenda, many leaders approach.
Thank you, Kishan. Damian?
Yes, my take on that is a simple one following on Kishan's one. I spoke about whole of government, and I think whole of government speaks for itself. I spoke about whole of society. So you're talking about civil society organizations that may be involved, because don't leave them out. And we talk also about climate change in all policies, the same way we have health in all policies, climate change issues in all policies. You see, part of the difficulty is that it must start at the top. I was a former politician. I sat in cabinet, and I could not understand, on hindsight, why we continue to see certain subjects separately. So there are two things. You see subjects separately, you come into cabinet and you discuss subjects separately, although you can see some lines of integration. Secondly, there's competition. And there's competition because ministries in governments, and I like to speak straight out, I have no difficulty speaking straight out. Competition. We see competition for the same pot of money in Trinidad and Tobago, in St. Lucia, in Grenada, in Dominica, in the Dominican Republic. So it's competition, and there's a pecking order for ministries. So the pecking order is the Ministry of Finance, followed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Ministry of this and the Ministry of... So we do not see things together. We compete for the resources when it comes to budget time. And this is how we operate. Listen, gentle people on set. It's a mindset that needs to change. It's a consciousness that has to be nurtured. Thank you.
Thank you. May I comment?
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yes, Ulrich, if I may.
Right.
Just coming on from what Kishan and Damian said. He's right, Damian, in relation to his statement that there needs to be a change of mindset. And in Dominica, we have developed the Climate Resilience Recovery Plan. And what we have done is to work with all of the ministries, because their strategic plans have to be aligned to the Climate Resilience Plan. And so the work is ongoing now. It does require a change of mindset, but it's important for everybody to be, their work plan, their work program to be aligned to the Climate Resilience Recovery Plan. And that is what we're doing. We're also looking at our legislation, our regulations, our policies to make sure that all of those capture the resilience initiatives and imperatives, so that we look at it from a holistic manner. What are the changes that we have to make legally to ensure that everybody is on board with the resilience agenda? Then we take it down to the community level. What is the role of the communities in building resilience in the country? And then also what are the roles of individuals? So it has to be a whole of society approach. Everybody needs to be on board with that process. Otherwise, we will not achieve the resilience that we want. We can't leave it just for the government and the politicians. It has to be everybody, the private sector. Every person has to be part of this resilience process. It has to be teamwork. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Francine. I have a question from the floor, which is open to all panelists. So can any of the panelists comment on the role of MOUs as an instrument for fostering multi-sectoral collaboration? Is this an effective tool in our region? What has the experience been like? Damian, looking at your comments.
I suspect you said, Damian, because you know I'm saying that the MOU is not worth the paper on it if people don't want to come, don't worth the ink on the paper. It's not worth the ink on the paper if people don't have the mindset that they need to operate in certain ways. And I agree with Francine Barron. Yes, everybody must come together, but you know what's the missing dimension, gentle people? Leadership. And not just leadership at the level of the ministry, leadership at the level of the country. Sometimes we forget about that. If the leader at the level of the country, 5 years after 5 years, whether one comes in and the other goes out, if that leadership is not there to galvanize the support, to lead that consciousness, to say everybody is going down this path, I fear that it would be an exercise in futility. I'm sorry, I'm saying it like it is. People may not like it, but too bad.
Anybody else?
No, but Damien is right that leadership is important. For Dominica in particular, we have at the highest level the vision expressed by the Prime Minister that he wants Dominica to become the first climate resilient nation by 2030. And so everything that we do has to be guided by that vision. And without the leadership at the very top, you are right, it's not going to happen because you will get resistance from at all lower levels if you do not have that leadership at the top, that this is where the country needs to be going. And so that is key. It does involve us seeing things differently, doing things differently. And there will be resistance. There's always resistance to change. But if there is the directive at the highest level that this is the direction that the country is going in, and everybody is talking about resilience and working towards that goal, then it can happen. Thank you.
And just one point to add to that. Look at COVID-19. At the highest level, prime ministers of the country had to take charge. We are not saying that they just took charge without taking the advice of the different sectors and so on, the police forces and the health system and all the other things that they did. But look, they had to take charge and come and talk to the nation about what was going on in terms of what vision they were looking at and so on. And that is why I'm saying COVID-19 has taught us that leadership at the highest level, whether it is climate change or health or whatever, has to be strong, bold, and visionary. Emily Rodriguez has not had a chance to speak, and I don't like that.
Well, you're a good politician.
Well, I am.
We have a lot of other questions coming. Yes, Emily, sorry.
No, it's only I am hearing to all of you, hearing you. And I am thinking about the answers, and in the Dominican Republic, the MO. Sorry, my English is not very well, but I am trying. The MOU are so important and have good results because when we have the sign in a paper and the test with this important information that you could see again and again, the other politician that come and see the sign could it keep and maintains the compromise with the other institution because they have we have a paper, this paper, and in the Dominican Republic for this we use the memorandum of understanding, and we have a lot of results.
Thanks. There's another question here. I fully endorse the idea of a multi-sectoral approach. In fact, I think that's the only way forward. But how could a proper functioning multi-sectoral approach be attained without egos and with the outcome of meaningful policy decisions? Anybody willing to take that one up?
Well, I said in my presentation, one of the difficulties or barriers we have is what I call stakeholder or partnership bullying, or what I would prefer to say then, I think it will sound a lot more palatable, the whole business of stakeholder hegemony. And I'm sure Kishan can talk about that. I'm sure he can talk about that just like me, and Barron can talk about that as well. All of us can talk about that. Because part of the problem with the multi-sectoral thing, which is really a good way forward, a good strategy forward, is that there are some stakeholders who believe that they hold in more stake than others. And that's part of the problem. Let's look at the ministry. Let us look at the ministries, as I said before. The Ministry of Health is just coming into its home in terms of the health system. There was one stage that the Ministry of Health was not considered to be anything of any consequence a few years ago. Isn't that true, Francine? Isn't that true, Kishan? Ministries of Health are now coming into their own because people realize now that ministries are super important for infectious diseases, re-emerging infectious diseases, and the connection to the economy and to livelihoods and to the development project of the Caribbean. So that is part of what we see going on. People must come in with the same interests and so on, and it must not be a situation that Ministry of Finance, okay, we are the boys here, we understand what is going on, and everybody will follow suit. We have to break that. We have to break the ego mentality. That's part of the difficulty that we have. I'm sorry, I'm saying it like it is.
Good. Kishan, I haven't heard from you, so I'm going to pose the questions that directed to you, which is, what thoughts do you have on educating the policymakers? Brief the parliament, get the interreligious organizations on board.
Yeah.
The last one, the Pope helped you with that one a few days ago.
Yes, but that is also important because religious freedom is always, guaranteed to work for the believers. I mean, it's one of those things. So hearing it from religious leaders, no doubt carry a lot of weight. Unfortunately, climate change in itself is a belief system. It has evolved into. But I just wanted to touch before on the health, the issues that Damien spoke to. From our experience, what we have seen is that once we reach out and the roles and responsibilities are understood, what we have seen happening now is that the champions are naturally coming out of the woodwork and coming into their own. Because now they understand their relevance, they understand their context, they understand their roles, they understand the responsibility in the broader, again, forgive me for saying it again, but they want a gender many leaders approach. And therefore they are now approaching us to jointly develop climate change and health projects for GCF funding, for example. And we have also reached out to them. And we've just retrofitted as a pilot project, one of the rural health centers, so that in times of emergency, they can be at least functionally operational in case they get cut off. So they have solar panels and water harvesting and water purification and so on. But to come back to the question, Neville, that you asked, I mentioned in the chat that I actually made two climate change presentations to parliamentarians. In fact, I did one a few years ago to the Common Parliamentary Association, and one to our own domestic parliament. And I was pleasantly surprised in parts that there were parliamentarians who actually understood the issue and asked intelligent questions. I even appeared, before, what they call joint select committees of parliament on various issues to testify. And the speaker herself was very, very knowledgeable and started to ask some of the questions that I found myself, not only in a little bit of awe, but having to think, and that's always a good sign when parliamentarians and policymakers ask questions and they get you thinking, because it shows that they're understanding and they're probing and they want to advance the issue. So I think that constant education of policymakers, while it is a challenge, I think is an ongoing issue, an ongoing activity that needs to be maintained and sustained. So, for example, what we have done locally is periodically develop climate policy briefs on various sectors. and submit it to cabinet or to the minister for this, for dissemination and also in the press. So these policy briefs are updated based on evidence, based on the latest science, based on the any impact assessment or climate risks assessment that we would have had, on any greenhouse gas inventory, data that we would have developed. So it's an ongoing effort that needs to be sustained, so that it gets in, eats into the skin and the consciousness of the policymakers, because they keep hearing it over and over, and they begin to understand. And I think I just made a comment in the chat as well. Now, given the international policy framework, when we've come a long way, Neville, from UNFCCC days, that the Paris Agreement has now made such a huge impact, not only on governments, but on what actually motivates governments, and that is the private sector. And we are now seeing that businesses are now aligning themselves with the emerging area of environmental, social, and governance reporting, and now to be listed. Standards and Poor's has a S&P ESG 500 rating, and if a business or a company gets on that, it means that that they are really ready for investing. We've seen what happened with Shell, with Chevron, and Exxon in the last few months, and what stakeholders and shareholders can demand, and what the courts are now pronouncing on in the interest of public concerns. So I think it's shifting. I think the transition is clear. It's now up to us to basically build the champions in the various sectors, particularly in the health sector, as we have seen that happening. They're coming out, so that it takes on a life of its own, and continue to impress on them the importance and the need for this integration, this mainstreaming. From the days of Mac, Neville, you would remember, we've come a very, very, very long way now, where we see policy harmonization, where most of the policy recommendations now, the various sectoral policies now integrate climate change considerations into the strategic planning. So it has been working. It's a work in progress. It's a bit of rolling a barrel up a hill, but we cannot stop until we get over to the top of the hill, and then hopefully it takes on its own momentum. Thank you.
Thanks, Kishan. There's a question here. Are there structural barriers preventing intersectoral collaboration? Are some ministries forbidden to work with others because it is not their turf? Anybody wants to take that up?
Well,
Francine, you should have some good experience in Dominica, having to pull all those bits together.
Yes. I would not say that there are restrictions. There is some level of turf, but I think that by and large the ministries are working together. Again, following on the leadership from the top of building resilience generally. I think that the different ministries are finding their own what's the word? They're finding their own path towards supporting the resilience agenda. And as CREED, we're working very closely with them to ensure that they align their policies with the resilience agenda. So even new policies that are being developed, whether it's our national energy policy or agricultural policy, we're ensuring that all of those policies are grounded on building resilience. And so there isn't so much of a turf war as there is collaboration and cooperation with the different ministries. And what they have done is there's a committee of permanent secretaries that meet and discuss issues. And so they are seeking to collaborate by ensuring that they meet on a regular basis so that they're aware of what is taking place in each other's ministries, and so that there's a greater collaboration. But it takes time, And it will not happen overnight, but I think that there's a willingness to work towards resilience. And I mean, and again, just to indicate from a Dominican standpoint, I think that all parties are on board with the resilience agenda, not only just the government, but the opposition parties as well, all working towards the same goal, because Hurricane Maria for us was very devastating. And we realized that we needed to do something different. We cannot be in that same situation again. To have a country affected by 2 storms that wiped out 300% of GDP in a matter of hours, and knowing that climate change is going to result in more severe events, unless you build that level of resilience for your country, you will not be able to survive. And therefore, there is the will of the people at all levels to get this done. And so I think that sort of surpasses any suggestion of maintaining turf that perhaps in the past might have existed. So it's a question of willingness to get things done. The discussion earlier was speaking about how people have come together to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. I think when there is a crisis situation, people react differently, and people will come together and find new ways of doing things to overcome the challenges. And I think that's where we are now in relation to resilience building and the fact that people are working together to ensure that we can become more resilient. Thank you.
Emily, you wanted to say something on this?
Yes, thank you. In Dominican Republic, we have an instrument that could make a difference of the action of every ministry and institution, public institution. One of these is the decree of the National Council of Climate Change, where I working. And this institution is to a council of different institutions and private organization and academia and civil society and ONGs. And in this concern of the organization, we have the opportunity to have an action of climate change cross-cutting in the national level. And other instrument is our national develop strategy, which has 4 axes, and the 4th of this is regarding the climate change, the adaptation of climate change, and the reducing mitigation. And with this instrument that I mentioned in my presentation is allowed to, and with this allowed, the whole of the public institution have to planning their annual planning, operation planning in the institution with these indicators and action lines. And for this reason, the action of the climate change is established in every ministry and in the private sector.
Thanks. We lost some time at the beginning. I don't know if we're going to get it back, but I'm assuming that we wouldn't. And there was a quick question here about the NCDs. Do you think which specific NCDs do you think are most affected because of climate change, and what actions do you recommend? Our data shows increase in diabetes after hurricanes Irma and Marta in Puerto Rico. I think that's for you, Damon.
Well, I do not know that. I believe that all NCDs were affected or will be affected because, first of all, where do you get the support? COVID-19 taught us that as well. Sometimes you don't get the requisite support that you need or the services that you need because, and I'm sure that Francine could say so after Marie in Dominica. COVID-19 is a disaster in and of itself. And the difficulty we have had is that people with NCDs have not been able to access the services readily. So all NCDs are really affected in one way or the other. So I'm not sure if there's a pecking order in terms of the impact on NCDs. My research does not reveal that. Thanks. I don't know if somebody else has anything.
Just to add to that, I agree that it's, it affects all of the NCDs. But just to give a scenario, after Hurricane Maria, we would have been, well, the economy was severely affected and we would have relied for some time on support from the outside community. And with a lot of food stuff coming in, a lot of it was processed foods that are high in salt. So that was not good for the diet of persons suffering from diseases such as hypertension and so on. So in approaching resilience building, we have to look at how do we ensure that people have access to fresh foods and there's less reliance on processed and tinned stuff, because that affects severely the persons who have NCDs, and particularly because health is impacted by hurricanes. You may not have access to healthcare at the same standard you would have had if it had not been a hurricane situation or crisis situation. So that itself has its own impact on persons suffering from NCDs. So yes, definitely disaster situations impact persons suffering from NCDs much more severely, and it may make the situation worse. And so in looking at resilience, we have to identify those challenges and see how best we can address them so that you don't have a repeat of those things happening. Thank you.
Just one other important point, Ulrich, that is why we are saying that disaster preparedness committees, that is where health has to be taken into account, because we have ignored health in terms of disaster preparedness committees and in terms of managing the situation or coordinating the situation. So now I think the OECS has taken the lead in that respect in terms of ensuring that that health is mainstream in terms of the disaster preparedness and the after effect. So this is something that I think will be coming on stream. Ulrich, you're muted.
Thank you, panel, for excellent contributions. I have a couple of thoughts I want to share with you before we go. And one is more general about the entire conference, in which the health sector, which I agree has been neglected in our work, in our earlier work in the Caribbean. And they seem to be sort of begging for a place at the table, but they don't have to. If you listen to Professor Taylor's excellent presentation yesterday, he spoke about the climate change impacts and the social determinants of health. And I think the health sector as a sector should sit down and define those determinants and understand what the climate risks are, and make sure that they insinuate these issues into the different sectors. The social determinants, health, a lot of them are connected with our ability to satisfy the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think the health sector is sitting in a very strategic position to make sure that health is now very visible across the Caribbean work and climate change adaptation and mitigation. Thanks very much, Kishan, for bringing in the issue of health benefits for mitigation, because I think that is an excellent entry point for discussion with our population. Francine, I envy your position at this point in time. You have a most challenging position, but is pregnant with opportunity. Opportunity basically to show the Caribbean what we really mean when we talk about building back better and building back stronger and addressing the issues of climate risk as we rebuild. There's also an opportunity, given the theme of this conference, to see how you can really work with the health sector across the Caribbean to show as how you build back better that the health of the population becomes a priority, and that our development basically is people-centered. I remember an experience with Cuba when they were talking about evacuating people during a disaster. They actually said that, look, whenever people get into a shelter, if they're asthmatic, every single drug is there to look after their problem. It's people-centered. And if it's people-centered, health has to be a top priority and not just some appendage to another sectoral policy. So, and thanks, Damien, for showing us basically some of the issues related in the whole challenge of intersectoral collaboration. And to you, Emily, the NDCs, all of our countries are now preparing advanced and revised NDCs for the UNFCCC. It's a critical document, and I would behoove the health sector in the Caribbean to make sure that they understand the processes nationally that are developing these policy documents, these plans for implementation, and to ensure that health is part of the package that goes forward. As I say, this was an excellent session. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I wish all of you the best in your endeavors. And I look forward to seeing health basically being showcased and emerging as one of the most critical issues as a Caribbean people that we have to address as we talk about building resilience to climate in the Caribbean. Thank you very much. And I must thank my audience for being, it's now, we are 2 hours behind you in the Caribbean. So I still, you know, it's just after twilight. You're well into your evening. So enjoy your evening. And it has been a pleasure. Thanks to the organizers for giving me the privilege of being the moderator for this session. Thank you. Oh.